Hello everyone. Nepal has once again shocked the world as protests there have escalated far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Even the country's tallest five-star hotel, long regarded as a symbol of tourism, was reduced to ashes. Both the Prime Minister and Cabinet Ministers tendered their resignations. So what exactly is happening? Let's take a closer look. The protests began on May 8, 2025, when demonstrators took to the streets of Kathmandu to oppose the government's ban on social media. Very quickly, the unrest spread to other major cities. By the second day, peaceful rallies had spiraled into violent clashes. Protesters set government buildings ablaze, stormed the Kathmandu International Airport, and even attacked the private residences of senior politicians. In one tragic case, the wife of a former prime minister lost her life when her house was torched. The situation has been described as the most severe political crisis Nepal has faced in years. Initially, the police tried to disperse crowds with tear gas, but eventually live ammunition was deployed. Clashes left at least 19 to 22 people dead, with hundreds more injured. Protesters advanced a list of uncompromising demands, signaling that their discontent was not aimed at one individual, but at the political system as a whole. The military was deployed to Kathmandu, and a nationwide curfew was imposed. The Prime Minister seemed to underestimate the gravity of the crisis. Measures to quell the unrest proved ineffective. On the contrary, the use of force and the imposition of a curfew only deepened public anger, fueling attacks on symbols of state power, such as the parliament and politicians' residences. Under mounting pressure, the government eventually lifted the social media ban on May 9, 2025. Yet, despite the Prime Minister's resignation, protesters continued to occupy the streets, calling for the dissolution of parliament and fresh elections, evidence that the crisis was far from over. As is often the case, conspiracy theories abounded. Some alleged that the United States was behind the unrest, a narrative frequently repeated whenever protests erupt globally. Others pointed the finger at China. But two questions expose the weaknesses of such claims. One, if every protest worldwide is orchestrated by the U.S., then who exactly incited the waves of protests inside the U.S. itself? Two, Nepal is a small, resource-poor country. What strategic incentive would either Washington or Beijing have to destabilize it? While external influence cannot be fully ruled out, there appears to be no compelling evidence of such intervention. Instead, the root causes lie within Nepal itself. Over years of observation, one can see that the crisis stems from a generational clash of worldviews. For decades, Nepal was known internationally as a humble yet peaceful nation, the birthplace of Buddhism, where life was slow-paced and relatively content despite widespread poverty. Tourists often returned with glowing reports of tranquility and simple joy. But today's youth paint a very different picture. Interviews with protesters revealed deep frustration. They felt abandoned by a corrupt elite that hoards wealth while doing little to foster national development. With GDP per capita at just $1,400, infrastructure in disrepair, and an unemployment rate of 12.6%, many young Nepalis see no future at home. Over 4 million workers are employed abroad, sending remittances that astonishingly account for 26% of Nepal's GDP, a figure higher than any single domestic industry, and vastly more than Vietnam's 1 to 2% remittance share. In some tragic cases, Nepalis even enlist in foreign conflicts, such as in Russia, to earn a livelihood. The protesters' grievances converge on one theme: systemic corruption. For years, Nepal has ranked among the most corrupt nations globally. Citizens are outraged that while the children of officials flaunt luxury cars and designer handbags online, the children of poor families return home in coffins. Such inequality has ignited fury, particularly among young people connected to the outside world via the internet. Here lies the generational divide. Older generations accustomed to hardship accepted poverty as normal. They valued peace and simplicity, largely indifferent to how the elite lived. Younger generations shaped by social media are far less tolerant. In a world where material wealth is displayed and compared daily, they see privilege as intolerable when it stems from corruption and inequality. This frustration explains why protesters even set fire to a luxury hotel, believing it to be owned by corrupt elites. To outsiders, this seemed irrational, destroying an already fragile economy. But to many protesters, It was a symbolic strike at privilege, a way of dragging the elite down with them. Ultimately, this crisis is a crisis of trust. When governments censor social media under the guise of regulation, youth see it as an attempt to suppress truth. When officials deny ownership of assets, citizens dismiss it as lies. In such an environment, no explanation can restore confidence. The protests in Nepal, therefore, are not just about social media or corruption. They represent a profound generational rupture between a past willing to endure poverty and peace and a present that demands accountability, transparency, and dignity.